being low canopy, dense and gnarled forest. And here's some of the birds that we saw. The ochre-faced toady tyrant, which is a little tiny flycatcher. The robust woodpecker, which is larger than a pileated woodpecker. The velvety black tyrant. Like our flycatchers, like willow flycatcher and eastern kingbird, they belong to this immense family called tyrant flycatchers. And here we have a dozen or so species in Montana. South America is the king of tyrant flycatchers. On this trip, I think we had something like 70 species of flycatchers. So anything that has tyrant in its name, it's a flycatcher. Swallow-tailed manakins were another of my favorite birds we had. Large-tailed ant shrike. This was one of the ones I really wanted to see here. Rufous gnat eater. And we also had some marmosets, which are a small type of primate. It's a little smaller than a house cat. In the afternoon, we took a hike up to a ridge, which was full of really unique plants. I am nowhere near a botanist, and from what I understand, there's a ton of endemic plant families there. This one on the left is fire. It has to use fire to produce seed, and it's really resistant. So this was after a brush fire, and it gave it this really bizarre kind of woven pattern. Speaking of fires, while we were there was a little bit of a brush fire going on, and so we had some really smoky evenings. The main bird for that hike was this hyacinth visor bearer hummingbird. It's only found in the kind of the tops of little ridges in this small area of Brazil. And try as I did, I didn't quite get a good picture, but a couple of fun ones. And the best thing we saw there was this maned wolf. So even though it's a wolf, it's actually more closely related to foxes. And every night, the people who work there, they put out a plate of scraps. This night was a bunch of bananas. And the maned wolf came and munched on some of the bananas. It was a real highlight of the trip, just a few days in.
Is that radio call?
That one is radio collared, yeah. So the maned wolf is endangered. They need a lot of kind of savanna habitats, which of course, like here in the US, a lot of our grasslands are the easiest to cultivate. So a lot of the habitat's been lost, and the family groups there in the sanctuary, a couple of them are radio collared. So with that, we'll move to the next spot. And this final area is kind of our last major stop in the Cerrado Savannah. We visited a few kind of sub points within this region, and I kind of condensed them in this. So while we were in the town of Pompeo, we picked up a local guide, the guy here with the camera, and he took us around for a day and a half and showed us a bunch of secret spots for some really cool birds. One of the birds that we got great looks there was the fork-tailed flycatcher. Yeah, really showing off its namesake there. This is a wing-banded ornero, which they make this big clay nest with this kind of trap door in it. And ornero is kind of the Latinized word for oven, and so the idea is that it looks like a clay oven. We also saw this blue and yellow macaw, and in this broken top palm tree is where it was nesting. One of the specialty birds of the region is this coal-crested finch. There are very few true finches in South America. This finch is actually in the tanager family. And there's a lot of birds that resemble sparrows or finches that are actually in the tanager family. We also saw this great curl-crested jay. And a pretty emblematic bird, the toko toucan.
How big is it?
Is which?
How big is it?
The toucan?
Yeah.
Maybe 10 inches.
Wow. Why do they have people?
That's a great question. It's really lightweight and hollow. And so it can function as thermoregulator. It's also, because has blood vessels going to it, they can kind of pump up the color when they're breeding or when they're agitated. It's also just a big tool. So toucans, famously eat fruit, but they also have a dark side. They eat a lot of baby birds. They'll raid birds' nests. They'll eat snakes and lizards. And so that tool, the edges of the bill are serrated, so they are almost like a steak knife. And so they can shred apart like a fledgling bird. And so I think it has a lot of different functions, but South America is just it's the continent of the birds. And so sometimes you get these runaway evolutionary trains where you develop these birds with really bizarre, like plumes or big bills like that for who knows why. While we're walking around, we visited this stream where on the side I found some cubes of iron pyrite. And along the river there, we saw this black-collared swallow. And our local guide has a few tricks up his sleeve. So one of them is here. He developed this little tunnel in the grass, and he trained this ocellated crake to come into. So this is a little rail. It's smaller than our Sora, and it's super, super shy, and it was almost a myth up until the last 10 years where local guides in South America have learned that they can create a little tunnel in the grass, put some mealworms, and call to the bird and train it to come into mealworms. And so there's a little mealworm right here. So that was a really, really special opportunity to see this ghost of a bird so clearly. And some post ocellated crake excitement. That evening, we also saw burrowing owls, which was pretty cool to see a friendly face. And we had really good luck with nightjars. So it started out with least nighthawks flying around and perched. And then our local guide showed us a spot for tropical screech owl, a spot-tailed nightjar, and this super cute little nightjar. It's hard to tell from the photo, but it might have been about as big as a Western tanager. It was smaller than a robin. And so after that, we went to Canastra National Park. Now, this is an immense national park, just shy of 500,000 acres. It protects a huge amount of intact Cerrado savanna. And the logo there is the Brazilian merganser, which was one of our main target birds of visiting Canastra. So you can see the hills with the grassland savanna habitat here. And this was particularly dry. As the headlines kind of around the world sort of echo each other. While we were there, if I remember correctly, they hadn't had rain in 175 days. So it's just at the tail end of the dry season, but even though it's called the dry season, they should have periodic rains, whereas this area didn't see any rain for months. Well, and there's still these areas of green where there's some groundwater and springs that form these rivers and pools. And that ended up being a really crucial habitat to bird while we were there. Some of the birds in this habitat were the Campo flicker, closely related to our flicker. The red-legged Seriema, which is a bizarre kind of hip-high bird that struts around in the grassland and eats snakes. This is actually the only bird that is more or less directly descendant from the Pleistocene era terror birds that were like the 10-foot tall flightless birds that ate little mammals across South America. Black-throated saltator, which is also actually a tanager. This was one of my favorite birds of the area, the golden-capped parakeet. Hooded siskin. Cinnamon tanager. A lot of the birds in this habitat are kind of like here, shades of brown, but there are some splashes of color. This was one of our favorite birds of this area, was this little tiny flycatcher called the cock-tailed tyrant. Its tail kind of sticks up straight up like the rudder of a plane. And we actually watched it do a display where it flew in over a female bird and kind of hovered in the air with its tail up at like a 90-degree. And this is a really unique bird in South America, the black-capped Donacobius. It's in its own family, and I'm not quite sure what its closest relative is. And while I was trying to get this picture, I made a friend. So a local dog, farm dog, decided to beg for some pets. Yeah, a lot of farm dogs and street dogs on this trip. And they were all super friendly. And so that evening, our main goal was to visit this river that flows along the bottom of this big plateau. And that's where we were looking for the Brazilian merganser. So here's a photo of what one looks like. Yeah. The Brazilian merganser is a critically endangered bird with with about 250 pairs estimated. They prefer these clear water streams in this kind of grassland habitat. And this area of Canastra National Park is actually one of the best places in the world to see one.
Wow.
And I wish I got some pictures like this. But it's a spectacular bird.
So you did see it?
So we did see it. So what happened, this was my favorite birding experience of the whole trip. We were driving along this dirt road that went along this creek here as the sun was setting, sort of frantically searching every pullout that overlooked the river, looking for these birds. And in my head, my search tactic was a bit like looking for harlequin ducks in Glacier, kind of drive up along Upper McDonald Creek and just like watch the creek. But as the sun was setting, we realized we weren't going to have enough time to check the whole river. And Tom said, well, they're mergansers. And back home, the common mergansers, every evening, they'll wherever they are feeding along the river, they'll fly towards their favorite roost, whether that's upriver, downriver. So he thought the best thing to do in the 15 minutes of light we had was to find a spot with a good view along the river and just wait and see if one is going to fly to roost up or down the river. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
So this perfect spot on the river that was a straight shot due west to the setting sun. We sat here on this bend, and then this was looking toward the left. So the river kind of made this bend. As we were watching and waiting, I picked up a flying bird coming right at us, and this adult merganser flew right at us, coming out of the sun, around the bend, down this way, and disappeared. And it was. The whole thing probably took, a second and a half, but it was like the most spectacular birding experience. So no photo, but we saw the bird. And we celebrated with some greasy Brazilian street food. It's pretty common in these small towns to a little food vendor will set up a bunch of plastic chairs and plastic table out in the side of the street, and this burger type thing is a pretty common street food. You can pretty much have any kind of toppings. I think I had some like crunchy potatoes and a fried egg. And we made friends with another street dog. This one was very eager to have a bite of Andrew's burger.
Big.
Yeah. I think it's probably had its share of burgers. Yeah. And so with that, we hit the road again and left the kind of interior Cerrado habitat behind and headed towards the Atlantic rainforest. This was how I spent 21 days in the back seat with all of our junk, editing photos as we drove. We headed to Campos do Jordão, which is the highest city in Brazil at just over 5,000 feet. The locals say if you're really lucky, every once in a while, it might frost up there, and which creates this like sort of like mass travel day where everybody drives up the mountain to try to see frost. Bizarrely, and I couldn't figure out why, but it's this really interesting like Bavarian style town. It is this weird enclave in the mountains. There's a lot of vacation homes, so a lot of wealthy Brazilians from Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo will have summer homes up there. But for us, importantly, it's this amazing place where we can experience the Araucaria trees or the monkey puzzle trees. And so this is this ancient lineage of tree that dates back 200 million years to the time of the dinosaurs. And there's a handful of birds that are specialists to these monkey puzzle trees. Along with that, though, we saw a ton of new birds because we totally switched ecosystems and are now in the forest. So here's some scenes from birding the side of this little dirt road. Most of what you're seeing kind of 15 feet up is actually bamboo. It's dense bamboo mid-story with the Araucaria trees forming the canopy. One of the good birds we saw there was the swallow-tailed cotinga. A tricky bird to get eyes on always are the tapaculos, but this mouse-colored tapaculo showed well for us. It's a tiny little wren-like bird that stays buried in the undergrowth. We also got our first trogon of the trip, Sarukua trogon, and some red-breasted toucans. And I got this video of this pair of toucans calling. We also picked up some more tanagers. This is a brassy breasted tanager. This photo does not do it justice. This thing is a retina burner. Buff-throated warbling finch, which is a tanager. The Sehadumar bristle tyrant, another odd flycatcher. This one is only found in this coastal mountain range. The black-capped Piprides, which is a very rare and sought-after bird found in only the highest parts of the mountains here in southeast Brazil. And one of our best birds of the trip was this black and gold cotinga, which is like bigger than a robin in size, plump, all black bird with some gold in the wings. This was Andrew and I scoping the bird way down on this hillside. So I'll add a Google photo. But one of the best ways to find this bird is to listen for its sound. It has a super high-pitched whistle that it screams from the canopy.
Oh,
I could just click on. Also a hearing test. It makes this bird really hard to locate with this really high-pitched whistle. Yeah. So that was ringing through the forest all morning. And here on the left, this is where we stayed, this nice Airbnb. And one of the most specialized birds of the area is this vinaceous breasted Amazon parrot that is a specialist to the Araucaria forest. It peels back these cones and eats the seeds off the Araucaria cones. And we got to see this bird right from our balcony. So from there, we'll head down to the coast to the town of Ubatuba, which is super fun to say, and we'll enter the lowland rainforest. And I feel like this trip is kind of a trip of two halves. And this line here initiates the second half along the rainforest. This is one of the lodges that we stayed at. All of the places, or most of the places we stayed down here, have amazing bird feeder setups. While the first half of our trip felt a lot like birding kind of the western US, lots of long drives, visiting national parks, birding along the roads. Here, it felt a lot more like birding Costa Rica, where you visit lodges, you visit the bird feeders, you hike a little trail on the property, and you kind of hop from reserve to reserve. So we'll start with some of the forest birds. This is some of the views there. You can see the kind of the steep mountains here. Essentially, this mountain range tops out where we just were at 5,000 feet at that Swiss-like town and drops straight down to the coast. Very different feel to the kind of the parched grassland we were in just a few days ago. Some of the forest birds were the black-cheeked gnat-eater, ferruginous antbird, this orange-eyed thornbill, blonde crested woodpecker was a favorite of ours. Yeah, spectacular woodpecker.
How big?
About a flicker size. It's not as big as a pileated, but still kind of hefty. A little bigger than a hairy woodpecker, I think.
Oh.
And the yellow-fronted woodpecker, which this one is about hairy woodpecker size. Yeah. So some of these tropical woodpeckers have this yellow around the eye. That's actually bare skin, yellow skin around the eye. At this particular lodge, we also saw a few frogs, the white-edged tree frog and this monstrous blacksmith tree frog. But some of the best things about here were the bird feeding setup. So this place, There were just hundreds of hummingbirds coming into dozens of bird feeders.
Is this the same?
No,
Is it different? It's different. Oh,
So on the left, there's a black Jacobin, and then this is a plain parakeet. And here's some of the feeder birds that we got. Yeah, talk about retina burner. The green-headed tanager and Brazilian tanager, these were common birds at these bird feeding setups. Along with the blue dacnus and the red-necked tanager. Yeah, this is where all the color was hiding.
wow.
Also, we had over a dozen species of hummingbirds. Some of the goodies were the black-throated mango and the amethyst woodstar, and the black Jacobin and the violet-crowned wood nymph, which we saw earlier, but this one is much better light. Some of our most sought-after hummingbirds were the coquettes. These are tiny little hummingbirds, like a calliope, but really bizarre patterns with this orange crest and this like black and white frill that comes down. And we also had the festive coquette, which had a bizarre little mustache going. Another feeder bird was this chestnut-bellied euphonia, which I think has a fantastic color pattern on it. And even though it looks like a tanager, this is actually a finch. And here's one of the guys at the lodges, one of the owners, setting out the bananas with the tanagers just mobbing the. Yeah. It was truly paradise. Another thing at some of these lodges, just like with the ocellated crake, they have a few special birds trained. So that guide was calling in the great ant shrike, which is this like massive, almost magpie-sized ant shrike. And I believe this is the only place in the world where anyone has one trained to come into mealworms. We also had another spot for another species of crake. This is our local guide setting up the mealworms at this blind for the red and white crake. This is another species of rail that lives in like wet grassland and marshes that are almost impossible to see. It's a bit smaller than our Sora, but these really dedicated local guides in the tropics are really changing the game with how they've set up these viewing opportunities for birds that were otherwise impossible to see this well. And from the coast there, we shoot past the city of 22 million people of Sao Paulo and go to Intervales State Park. Over 100,000 acre state park, and it preserves the largest stretch of intact Atlantic rainforest. Again, relegated to my back seat. The night we got in, that's when it started to rain. And so we have this kind of storm moving in. And while we had great weather through 17 days of our trip, the last 3 days of our trip, it rained all day, every day. That didn't one?
Oh, sorry. Oh, geez. Okay.
But that first night, we saw a common paraki, which is another kind of night bird on the lawn. And we actually got to watch it hunt under the street lights. So this is cell phone video that's sitting here on the little road. And it flies up, catches a bug, and lands back on the road. And it was doing this in the rain. And the rain also brought out the frogs, and so we saw this huge cane toad. And yeah, so I decided to take a selfie with it.
Wow.
Yeah, quite large, larger than my hand. And then for the next couple of days, we set out and birded the rainforest in the rain. And this being a state park versus the last couple places with all the feeders, those were private reserves. This being a state park, it didn't have any bird feeding set up. So not only were we birding in the rain, but it was also a bit tough, and we were seeking out these really elusive forest birds. One of them being this species of hummingbird that does not come into hummingbird feeders, the purple-crowned plovercrest. We also saw the white-eyed foliage gleaner, which is a type of bird that kind of creeps through the vines and the bamboo. The short-tailed ant thrush, which is another really mysterious bird of the forest understory, and we were really lucky to catch this out in the open. The white-browed woodpecker. I'm not sure why it's called white-browed, since it has a yellow brow. And a plain-winged wood creeper, and our local guide there showed us this roost for the long-tufted screech owl here. Very cool stuff. Yeah, so inspired by the cane toad of the night before, I took this selfie with this giant land snail. And I also convinced Tom to take a picture with it. And we're on a roll. We found this massive earthworm.
Whoa.
This was like a nearly 3-foot long earthworm, big around as like a hot dog.
Oh my God.
So, I'm taking a selfie with it as well.
You look scared.
Yeah, it's a little unnerving for sure. And that led us to some of my favorite birds of the entire trip. While we were walking the trails with our local guide, one of our targets was this black-fronted piping guan, which is this large and spectacular-looking game bird. It's basically like a tropical turkey that hangs out in the canopy. And I managed to get my favorite photo of the trip, kind of peering through the vegetation in the mist at this bird. One of the most spectacular birds of the area is this bare-throated bellbird. Here's an immature male. The adult males are pure white with this like turquoise blue naked face. And so to illustrate that, I linked a YouTube video. And they make this loud popping bell sound. This is one of the loudest bird sounds in the world. You can hear this sound for miles. Yeah, there's echoes of other birds in the background, other bellbirds. Yeah, spectacular bird.
Oh, I'm trying. Oh, that's a good idea. Just kidding. Oh no. Oh no, guys.
Even though you can hear these birds for miles, they're actually really difficult to see, hence my bad photo before. But it's a sound that kind of echoes through the forest the whole time you're in this habitat.
Like,
That's the end of the show.
Didn't break it.
How big are they?
Good question. They're about a robin size. So they're pretty large. It's maybe a little bigger than a robin, a little like plumper.
keep asking questions.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other questions?
Why is it crazy there?
That's a great question. So the bellbirds are in the Cochinga family, and I think the Cochingas are essentially like the birds of paradise of the Americas. They're all super bizarre and weird. And the bellbirds are all really loud. There's a few species of bellbirds that make these super loud bonks and screeches, and they all have weird stuff going on with their face. There's one in northern South America, like Venezuela, called the bearded bellbird, which has this neck of like skin tentacles that come off its face. It's super strange stuff.
Is this where we are?
I think so. One of the so some of the last tricks on our trip with our local guide showed us this solitary tinamou, which is another secretive forest bird that you never see, but it's came into this feeder full of cracked corn. So we got to see this bird quite close. This is about the size of a basketball with a little head on it.
Yeah.
And it just hangs out in the forest floor. And that
Oh, sorry.
and then this was my favorite bird of the trip. The Brazilian merganser was probably my favorite experience of the trip, but this was my favorite bird because the local guide there basically tamed this little covey of spot-winged wood quails to come in to feed out of your hand. And so this is our local guide feeding this little group of wood quail.
Oh, wow.
And again, these are forest floored birds in the rainforest. They're really skittish. They're really hard to see. So we got to see them quite close. So there's Andrew feeding them, and here's me feeding the wood quail. Yeah. So this experience, this was just fantastic. I never thought I'd be able to hand feed a wood quail, but yeah. So that, and then after that, we headed to Sao Paulo and caught our flights. So this was that was my journey through from the Cerrado savanna to the Atlantic rainforest. And this is my eBird map. You can see all of our eBird checklist pins. 21 days, we drove 1,700 miles, and we saw 471 species of birds.
Wow.
So in this presentation, I had about 65 birds. So imagine another 400 that we saw in 21 days. So thank you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Couple of questions, Dan?
Josh, did you prearrange the local guides before you went, or did you look them up once you were in country?
We booked ahead. So Andrew from Bozeman, his wife is Brazilian. He's fluent in Brazilian Portuguese. He kind of set this trip up because he's plugged into the Brazilian birding network. He knew all these local guides and reached out to them. And we birded with a local guide for 5 days. I think we had 4 local guides over 5 days, but they're easy enough to find. Some of the guys that we've been out with are pretty famous. So if you just search birding guide in Brazil, it's kind of broken down by region because it's a big country. So we searched within the region we wanted to go. And then in the last place, Intervale State Park, it is compulsory to have a guide. So to enter the state park, you have to go with a local state park guide. So we could stay in the lodging there and kind of motor around the kind of common areas ourselves, but going on any of the trails, we had a local guide.
What's the driving conditions like?
Yeah, good question. Driving, It felt a lot like driving kind of in like rural US. For the first part of the trip, a lot of like long open drives. The rules of the road are more like guidelines. But it's all pretty straightforward, right? So there are some signs that are in English and Portuguese, but aside from that, all the major street signs are shaped the same, right? All stop signs and yield signs and traffic lights are all the same, and they drive on the right and kind of turning, and that operates the same. We had Google Maps running the whole time. Download Google Maps or offline, punch in where you want to go, just follow it. So that was our tactic. Any other questions?
So the names of the birds, I mean, obviously they must be in Portuguese. But how does that work with you giving us English names?
Yeah, so because birding has such a like hobbyist following, right? There are people who've dedicated a lot of their free time into standardizing English names for birds. So for instance, in botany, or if you got really into like dragonflies, you'll just find that most people use the scientific name to communicate when you're talking about like what kind of obscure, moth that you're looking at. But with birds, because there's so many of us, for a long time they've standardized English names. So there's a full English language list of all the birds of the world. And that's pretty much what almost everyone operates with. Now, Brazil being a big country with a lot of local birders, they have their own Brazilian Portuguese names. I didn't learn any of those, but Andrew knew them. And our local guides knew all the Portuguese names, and they didn't really know any of the English names. So sometimes they would, but that was a lot of Andrew translating. And if he didn't know the name, he'd ask, and then the guy would pull up his phone and show him a picture of it or whatever. But yeah, so that's how I'm showing you English names, because there's a globalized standard list of bird names. Good question.
So, do you have a website or contact information?
Yeah, so I do trips through a company called Hillstar Nature. Hillstarnature.com. I have some business cards. But I also do have a website where I just post my stuff that I could show you later.
Josh, are the cane toads there considered an invasive species like they are in other areas?
That's a great question. So that big cane toad, it's poisonous, and if attacked, it'll release this like milky gel that's really toxic. South America is where they're native to, so they aren't a problem. Cane toads have been introduced in other parts of the world. For instance, Australia, they're a big problem because the animals there don't have any natural resistance to that, and it can cause a problem. But yeah, that's where they're from. Yeah.
I'm curious about just the migratory. I know it's hard to speak to the variety of species, but with the more temperate climate, where do they even found, or
That's a great question. Yeah. So most of Brazil falls below the equator, south of the equator. And in kind of the most tropical parts of it, the Amazon and the Atlantic rainforest, there is a little bit of seasonal movement along to follow like the dry and the rainy season. For instance, on the Atlantic rainforest, it's kind of altitudinal. They'll go up the mountain and down the mountain depending on the season. But kind of in southern Brazil, and then once you get into like Argentina and keep going south, you get further and further from the tropics. There is a proper migration that happens. It's just inverted, right? So our summer would be their winter, and those are the austral migrants, as we call them. So in that grassland region of Brazil, that's where some of these birds winter. And then in the southern summer, they go further south towards Argentina. So there is a bit of like flipped migration happening in southern Brazil. We did, yeah. One of the reasons why there were so many tanagers and hummingbirds at the feeders was because that was the season for that. had we been in, the wet season, they move up the mountain. And, because in the wet season, there's a lot more fruit available in the forest and that kind of thing, so they can kind of disperse up into the mountains. In some of the grassland areas, we did see a couple of austral migrants. There's a couple flycatcher type birds. That fork-tailed flycatcher was one of them. Yeah, good question. Any others? Yeah.
Were you doing any hiking or was it all from the car?
Yeah, good question. We did a lot of trail walking. Some of it verged on hiking. At the beginning of the trip, we did a proper hike. So it was one of the areas I cut out for time, but we kind of did this 6 mile hike up this kind of big granitic dome that's like an ancient volcano to look for a special bird up there. But yeah, there's a lot of like walking roads and walking trails, that kind of thing.
Did you see that bird?
We did, yes. It was a little brown bird, but yeah, we did see the bird on top of the mountain there. Yeah, so that was a good 6 hour hike. I didn't really want to do that again. Any other questions?
What types of predatory mammals are there then?
Yeah, good question. So, predatory to who? To us? Yeah, so,
Jaguar.
yeah. So at the top of the list, I'd say you could put like caiman, which are big alligator-like critters. There's a couple species of caiman that we saw in the wetlands, and then there's jaguar. But they're really restricted to the tropical forest zones. Out in the savanna, there's the maned wolf, but that isn't really a predator to people. They're quite tall because they're on stilts, like really long legs, but they eat a lot of fruit and rodents and that kind of thing. There are mountain lion down there. And then there's a bunch of really smaller cats, like ocelots and stuff. But as far as like predatory animals that we should be worried about, there's just, caiman and jaguar is really it. And I would consider myself lucky to get close enough to a jaguar to be worried for my safety. So yeah.
Buddies have been doing lots of different trips. Where are some of the other places you've gone and how is Brazil compared to that?
Yeah, so with my friends, I've been to Mexico and Guatemala and Costa Rica and Colombia and Ecuador. Brazil was really special because a lot of the birds in Central America and the Andes of South America are separate. So you can see all those birds and then go to Brazil and still see 1,000 new birds. Birding wise, it felt pretty similar. Like you're just seeing a ton of birds all the time. Even in that grassland zone, it felt similar to birding, kind of the grasslands and the valleys here in the summer. You drive around, like go to Nine Pipes or something, and there's just like, field birds on fence posts and ducks and hawks flying around. It was really similar. So it's a big place. Costa Rica, in my mind, is kind of like the epitome of this because it's like a lot of great birding in a really small package. Brazil was all that same birding, but kind of spread out a little bit. But I would say where we went was up there with like the best places you can go anywhere in the Americas.
You saw 170 different birds that aren't around here that you're not familiar with. How did you do your identification of different things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So local guides helped a lot, especially for like picking up all the calls and the songs. Andrew, having his in-laws there, he's been going to Brazil for 10 years. He's a lot of these places were new for him, but he knows the birds. But Tom and I did a ton of studying. So we got the field guide, some apps, and I just studied. I download a bunch of bird sounds and then kind of listen to it and quiz myself. I lead trips professionally, so that's one of the things that I'm a skill that an international bird guide needs is the ability to do like a exam cram and just front load 200 kinds of birds before visiting somewhere. So yeah, I definitely spent a couple months prepping for that. And I am going to the Atlantic Rainforest August of next year. If anyone wants to attend.
Josh, the places that you stayed look pretty high end.
Yeah, so because this was a trip with friends, I didn't take too many pictures of the food or the lodging. Usually when I lead trips, I do more of that. The lodging was fantastic. So again, because this was more a budget trip, we did stay at some like Airbnbs or some kind of mid-range places, but the bird lodges that have the feeders and everything, I would say it's mostly like kind of hand-built wooden cabins that are kind of basically have what you need, but nothing super fancy. But it feels like really well done, right? It kind of feels like really comfortable. Nothing too over the top because you're not there really to be surrounded by over the top stuff. You're there to like be outside and look at birds. But yeah, everything was quite nice and the food was fantastic. Like one of those first slides with the wood fired like stove with all of the pots and bowls laid out. That's like what all the meals are. And you just self-serve and there's like fresh fish and I recognized the skin on one of the fish from the Amazon. It's like this Amazonian catfish that I've seen in TV shows. It was kind of wild to be there. Oh, I'm eating that. But yeah, it was really good for sure. And yeah, the accommodation was good. Everywhere that you want it has AC, which is nice. Yeah, it's good.
What was the temperature?
It was generally pretty warm. It was kind of in the 80s. It was pretty dry interior and then humid, on the coast. As we got down past Sao Paulo, it was more like 75 and kind of humid, which was nice. And we actually had to like wear all of our jackets when we were up at the mountain spot. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. It felt a bit more tempered than like Costa Rica, where Costa Rica can feel quite hot. So it was really comfortable. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thanks everybody.